And we have on the line with us this morning State Police Public Information Officer, Trooper Cliff Greenfield, brought to us by Marcus and Mack, a law firm representing injured people. My tongue seems injured today. Can't get out of the way. Cliff, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Todd. Thank you for having me back on your show. I appreciate it.
It is our pleasure. We got a lot to talk about here this morning, and I want to start with an alert put out by the state police earlier this week. Scams are never going to go away, are they? And we've got some new ones that are actually old ones.
Right. So periodically, if we have a series of complaints of scams in the area, our dispatchers will let me know of those phone calls. And so that's what happened in this case earlier this week. They were receiving several reports of the common grandchild in jail telephone scam.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that probably the majority of folks are now aware of that. But if you're not, typically that involves the scammer doing a little background research on a potential victim. And they would try to uncover the name of a person's grandchild, grandson, granddaughter, and then they would pose as that grandchild, call the grandparent, and claim to be in jail or that they need money, and they're trying to solicit money.
Yeah.
And so that's very common. So we received at least 3 of those reports within the past week.
Wow.
To my knowledge, no one was scammed.
Mm-hmm.
No one
fell for it. Yeah.
Thankfully. So, but we wanted to be sure to get that out since we were made aware of it occurring in our area again.
Yeah. Well, one of the things about that is that we would hear that information and we'd say, well, who would ever fall for something as foolish as that? But they're just looking for one, and the scammers understand that. If the first one isn't going to, maybe the next one will, or the next one, they'll eventually they'll find somebody who is maybe reduced in their decision-making capabilities, and they might be able to entice them.
Right. And they can be very savvy. As I mentioned, they will use the name of the grandchild. They may find some other personal information by open source records, whatever they can find on the internet or by other means. And in one case that we had this week, one report, the potential victim was asked to give $10,000.
Oh.
And so it does seem, from what I know, the cases I'm aware of, that's typical, that they're asking for several $1,000s.
Mm-hmm.
But this is something that, for someone who's not fully aware, doesn't have all of their faculties, they may fall into this trap that could go on for weeks or months.
Yeah.
And so it's important if you have someone in your family who you think could be a potential target for a scammer like that, ask them if they've ever had calls like this.
Mm-hmm.
I would suggest bringing it up to them and then having a discussion about it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's never give any personal information of any kind out over the telephone, certainly not bank account numbers.
Correct, right. If there's any doubt in your mind that this call or whatever communication you're receiving is suspicious, in fact, I included in the press release, always contact a trusted family member or a friend
mm-hmm.
to talk it over. So if there's a doubt in your mind, just hang up the phone, call a trusted family member or friend, and get someone else's advice on the situation.
Yeah. Now, that's not the only scam that's out there. Phone scams are very common, and they're very low-tech, so they're very easy to pursue, but there are more sophisticated ones. And I guess it really, Cliff, it just comes down to being vigilant and really knowing who you're communicating with.
Right. I would recommend that anybody who's using social media only communicate with someone you know in real life. And the same applies to any correspondence you might receive in the mail. Only correspond or provide information to companies that you're already doing business with, or that you can look up their website and verify it's a legitimate business or charity before providing any information. The Pennsylvania Office of Attorney General has a very good website. It's attorneygeneral.gov, and they have great information on there about all kinds of scams. Todd, you had mentioned how some can be very sophisticated,
mm-hmm.
And one type of scam that comes to my mind that is typically very sophisticated are the romance scams, where it usually starts online on social media. A relationship is developed. It could be over the course of several months, and the scammer will pretend to be in love with someone and entice them to send money. Usually it goes overseas, and in that case, it's very rare that we're able to recover any of that money if it's gone overseas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just makes it even more complicated. I wanted to touch base with you as well on a couple of other topics, and one of those is just a review, if you will. Last year at this time, we were hearing all kinds of stories about meth labs across Indiana County, and before that, we were hearing all kinds of stories about heroin and fentanyl. Those aren't things we're hearing as much about lately. However, they're still real threats, aren't they?
They are. We are still finding the one-pot meth labs. Even earlier this year, we were finding them on roadsides in rural areas. So that is still continuing. If you're part of a group that would do roadside cleanup, I would make sure that you're wearing some good personal protective equipment if you're engaging in that activity, and be very cautious of bottles that you may see on the roadside. If something doesn't look right and you suspect that it could be a one-pot meth lab, just call 911. We'll send a trooper down to check it out. And at that time, if we suspect it is in fact a one-pot lab or a dump site where someone is discarding one-pot meth lab materials, we will send our clandestine lab response team down to safely process that area and collect that evidence. So it's very dangerous. Drug activity certainly is still occurring. I know that the U.S. Attorney's Office has had several cases lately. That's been in the news.
Yeah.
And all of our agencies are working together as best we can to combat the opioid epidemic in various ways and through arrests as well.
Yeah, terrific stuff. And there are a number of different ways that folks can report things, and anonymously too. And that's pretty important for people to know that you can do this anonymously. Your name doesn't have to be involved, and you don't have to be connected to that investigation.
Right. We understand that concern. Certainly, if you're someone in the community and it's your neighbor who you suspect is doing this and you don't want to be identified, we have it's called the Drug Trafficking Tip Line. It's 877-PA, no drugs, and you can call that number anytime, 24/7, and report what you know, and we'll follow up on it. It'll be directed to the appropriate law enforcement agency for investigation.
Trooper Cliff Greenfield on the line with us this morning. We're talking about a number of different issues that have been in our news lately, and one of those issues is the church fires investigation, or I shouldn't say church fires, but the arson fire investigations over the past couple of years. There have been some arrests, and those are making their way through the court system, but there are a number of cases that I don't know that they're unsolved, but there have been they're still on the books and under investigation.
Right.
You guys are still doing stops, I'm sure, to inspect buildings that are maybe a little bit out there, and schools and churches and other organizations, and you're always looking for information on any of these fires.
Right. We are still doing domestic security checks of churches and schools and businesses all across the county. I ran a query a couple of months ago, and I believe I queried domestic security checks across our Troop A area, which is 4 counties: Indiana, Cambria, Westmoreland, and Somerset. And at that time, we had been doing about 10 checks per hour across the 4 counties.
Wow.
On average. Regarding those arson investigations, I do know that there are still some where an arrest has not been made. Our fire marshal's unit here in Troop A, as well as Troop C, their headquarters is in Punxsutawney. They're working together. Those are ongoing investigations, so that's the most I can say at this time. But if anyone in the community would have information, the ATF has offered a reward. Pennsylvania Crime Stoppers has also offered a reward for information leading to an arrest.
Terrific stuff. Okay, so a couple of other things. We only have a little bit of time left with Trooper Clifford Greenfield this morning. I was saying on the air the other day, I'm just amazed at how often people think they can get away with retail thefts when there's so much video surveillance out there. And in the last couple of years, you have sent out those video images. We've posted them. Other news organizations have posted them. It's not very long before you have some pretty good leads, and we've had a number of arrests announced as a result of it. That's a really good collaboration, isn't it?
It is. We really appreciate that. I try to make that a point to thank you for your assistance in that regard. We've had good success with putting out photographs of suspects mainly involved in retail thefts or other thefts at retail stores in the area. And our job as police officers is, of course, to investigate crimes, but in most cases where you have an unknown suspect, we need help from the public to help us solve that case.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're doing with this by releasing those surveillance photos. Several businesses in our area have very good quality equipment where the surveillance images are of excellent quality, even to the point where you can identify someone's tattoos. And so that's a big help for us, and we really appreciate the cooperation and the help from members of our community.
Yeah, and one other thing I wanted to talk with you about this morning was in this COVID-19 era, state police operations, we talked about this a couple of months ago. As the situation has evolved and as more things have become open, folks do need to remain vigilant and know that our state police are as well. So when that traffic stop comes and there's a police officer walking up to the car, it's a good idea to put that mask on because that officer is going to have a mask on too, correct?
It actually depends on the situation. If we're able to don the mask, then we probably will. I would say that it falls on the specific facts of that situation.
Okay.
We're doing our best, and we have been for several months now, to handle certain incidents over the phone, to limit contact with the public if it's not absolutely necessary. But we're continuing to make traffic stops, just as we always have. You may find that instead of taking your credentials, such as your driver's license, registration, insurance card, the trooper may just have you hold them up to the window or to the doorway,
mm-hmm.
and he or she may just take the information down without actually taking possession of those.
Oh, okay. All right.
And just recording the information in their notebook.
That's a pretty good idea. All right. Terrific stuff. I appreciate your time here this morning to help update us on things that are going on with our state police in a number of different areas. Trooper Greenfield, have a wonderful day today.
Thank you, Todd. You too. Have a good weekend.
All right. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS 101.1 FM and AM 1160.